Hey, what's going on, guys? Heads here from Infinity Loops, and welcome back. Today, we take a look at the long-awaited Happymodel Mobula6 2024 edition. I'd like to start off first by saying thank you so much to Happymodel for sending this over and giving us a chance to check it out. I also want to let you know that I will be giving you only my opinion here and that Happymodel has absolutely no input on this whatsoever. Just a quick side note, if you want to get a more detailed look at all the specs and everything that goes into all these components and all the new stuff and any of the specs about them, I did a whole live stream where we went over all of the details of this and we pulled up all the spec sheets online and dug through all the descriptions and details and any info we could find on any of this stuff. I took the time to go ahead and clip all of that out and kind of cut the fat out of it, and I've put that down below in the description if you'd like to check that out. It's only a few minute long video. If you just want to learn a little bit more about the Whoop as far as the components go, I'll show you some nice HD pictures today, but we won't really go into the nitty gritty of all the details of this. So if you want to check that out, that is available in the description down below. Now, what we are looking at here with the Mobula6 2024 edition is a 65mm 1S 17.7 gram bind and fly Whoop. This thing is covered with new components, so let's go ahead and start at the brain here in the center with the flight controller. This is the Super X. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Super X HD, which is a very similar flight controller just with HD ports on it. This one, however, is analog with OpenVTX and a 400 milliwatt capable VTX built in. Moving out from the flight controller to the motors, we're looking at Happymodel's own SE0702 28,000 kV motors, and those are spinning some 31mm tri-blade gem fan props. Now, if we look up to the camera, that also looks very new, and that is because it is. This is the FX17B, I believe that's by FXT. I have never seen this on a Happymodel bind and fly myself, so that very well could be a new camera, so I'm excited to see how that looks. Housing that new camera is a new canopy, at least new to me. This is very light looking canopy. There are 4 holes for camera angle adjustment in the rear. There's also this little lid, kind of like bill, kind of a hood thing they've added to the top here. I can tell you, as someone who has broken quite a few cameras on Whoops before, normally my damage would come to the top of the lens or the lens housing, so having a little extra protection up there is very cool to see. Other new structural components we can talk about is this new frame. This is a 65mm frame from Happymodel. I guess this is going to be our new Mobula6 frame. This is very thin compared to the previous one. I'll put some before and after shots up there for you so you can see what it looks like compared to an original Mobula6 frame. Some things of note with this is that the struts are now split into kind of a Y shape. I'm not sure how that's going to affect durability, but I know a big problem a lot of people had with the original Mobula6 frame was the struts breaking off of the ducts, so hopefully that resolves that issue. One last thing that jumped out at me about this new frame is that there is no little point on one end. There's no triangle. Normally, on most of our 65mm frames at least, we see a little point on one side of it, and nothing on this one. Perfect square all the way around. So I guess that settles the argument about which direction the arrow is supposed to face. Some other key points I thought I should mention about this bind and fly. Number one is we are now seeing an A30 plug on this bind and fly, which is amazing. That's fantastic that Happymodel has moved away from the PH 2.0. I hope we never have to see it again. A30 works just fine. It's backwards compatible with BT 2.0. Everybody's happy. Now, one last thing I want to mention about this build before we go take it out is, I feel is pretty important. There are absolutely no plugs on this build. So no motor plugs, no camera plug. The only thing that plugs into the board directly is a UFL antenna for your VTX. Otherwise, you have a soldered on copper wire antenna for your ELRS instead of the ceramic cube we normally see. Your camera also solders onto the board, as well as all of your motors. So if you are not really comfortable with micro soldering, you may want to avoid this one to start. Maybe look for a bind and fly of theirs that has the plug and play camera and motors on it. Just makes things a little easier for when you're doing maintenance on your Whoop until you get more comfortable with soldering. Now, with all these new components and all this innovation, my hat's off to Happymodel if I was wearing one. But really, we haven't answered the biggest question of them all. Does it freestyle? On average, with the stock tune, I'm getting around 3 to 3.5 minutes of flight time, and I'm flying it on some brand new Weebleed FPV 300 milliamp BT 2.0 batteries. I'm very pleased to see that there is no damage to report on this. I've been flying it for about a week now, and I have not flown it once over anything soft. It's been over the tile floor out here or the hardwood floors in my house. I have not flown it outside even at all. We just haven't had the weather for it. But although I was only flying over hard surfaces, there is no damage to anything. Everything is still in proper working order, and the frame is still all in one piece. Same with the canopy, the camera. Everything looks good. As far as the overall flight feel of the build itself, it feels like it has plenty of power as far as the weight is concerned. Only at a little under 18 grams, 28,000 kV seems to be plenty for this build. There was a few issues that I had with it personally, and I'll go over those now. First, I'll start at the back with the pigtail here. Mine now is a bit crooked, just from crashing on the backside a bunch, but the stock pigtail that this came with was a bit snug, so using a stick battery without a pigtail on it, you had to kind of push the battery all the way in, plug it in, and then you could move it back some, but you did start to put tension. You can actually see the bend in the A30 from where that started to happen. But you start to put tension on the wire itself. I started doing it right at the solder joints, so now one of my pins in there is kind of wobbly. It just came loose in the plastic. What I ended up doing after that crash was just soldering on my own pigtail and extending it. So this is the stock A30 plug. I just soldered on my own wires and put it back onto the board. Pretty easy. Next thing I wanted to mention is I know I said that overall the build itself feels fine in the air. It handles well, and I'm referring to just the power and weight of the build. But as far as the tune is concerned on this, the one that came on mine was not the best. It just kind of felt a little twitchy in the air. It didn't really feel like it tracked too well. So I switched over to the Karate preset. I think it's called the Karate Whoop preset, maybe. I'll put it here if I'm getting it completely wrong. Since switching over to that preset, I have noticed it flies a lot smoother, and it just kind of fits my flight style a little better. It kind of suits that better than the default tune did. I also want to mention that on mine, at least when it came out of the box, the props were a bit high on the motor shaft. I don't recommend leaving them up that high. Usually, number one, they were sticking up just above the ducts, but secondly is it adds a bit of a pivot point. Your motor shaft becomes a bit of a pivot point, so if your props are sitting too high up and you smack down on the top of them, there's a better chance that you can cause a bend there in the motor shaft. So when you get yours, just double check, as you do with any bind and fly, or at least you should. Just make sure that the props are sitting as far down as you can get them. The last thing on here that I just personally wasn't a huge fan of was the camera quality, the picture quality of it. This new FXT camera, it's an okay picture. It's fine. I got used to it pretty quickly, but switching over from the Foxy or Pico Razor that I'm used to using, the colors seemed kind of washed out to me. It seemed a little dull and kind of fuzzy at some points. Sometimes in certain lighting it got kind of fuzzy. It could have just been me. I don't know, but just personally, I didn't really care for the camera. It's a pretty subjective thing, though. A lot of people disagree with my opinions on cameras. Overall, with all those things set aside, I do think this is a really neat bind and fly. I think it's a really cool tribute to the Mobula 6 that we all came to love years ago. This is just kind of like its updated badass brother. So I think Happymodel did a pretty good job on this one. One last thing I wanted to mention just about this review in general is that you should take all these things that I'm telling you about this with a grain of salt, because this is not released just yet. So there are some changes they could make to them before they're released. You may get yours in a month and it's perfect and you don't need to do anything to it. So just keep that in mind as you watch this review. Speaking of the release date, as far as I've been told, this should be coming out at the end of this month, February. When it is released, I've been told it should be around $112 to $115. Personally, I don't find that price to be too high for what you're getting here. I think it's pretty fairly priced, but all of this has just been my opinion. What I want to know is your opinion. What do you think of the Mobula 6 2024 edition? What do you think of the price? All the new components on it? What did you think of the picture quality? Leave your thoughts, comments, and everything else down below. I will get to them as soon as I can. Thank you again, Happymodel, for sending this out, and thank you for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care of yourselves.